Many small retailers in this city know what it's like to rent a space, open a business with all that entails, and then only a couple of years later, learn that the landlord is either jacking up the rent or simply refusing to renew the lease. The Small Business Job Survival Act, or SBJSA, is a city council bill which aims to even the playing field between landlords and their tenants. As of now, the bill is only a few sponsors short of passage, and the Speaker has said that she'll allow a hearing on the matter.
Well, as you might expect, when you're talking about business and money, not everybody thinks this is the right approach. Some elected officials feel the resolution as it stands now would in fact harm many small businesses. But right now, we're going to talk to two supporters of the SBJSA. From Take Back NYC, we have lead advocate Kirsten Theodos. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And we also want to welcome Linda Missel, the city manager for NYC Town Squared, an online community open only to verified neighborhood businesses.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Get them verified, make sure they're the real thing.
Absolutely.
Right? Good deal.
You know, I just want to start this conversation off with a really simple question. We were sort of in jest before, but I said, you know, how does a small business survive in New York City these days? And your answer was?
The answer is they can't, simply because they don't have any rights during the commercial lease renewal process. Unfortunately, right now the system is rigged in favor of the landlords, who basically determine whether or not if that small business will remain in business when their lease comes up for renewal. They establish all the lease terms. They establish whether or not if they even want to discuss with the tenant the option to renew, and it's pretty much all up to him or her whether or not if that business owner will remain in business or if they shutter the doors. And that's pretty much the situation. I mean, until they have some rights, like you said, the SBJSA would level the playing field in the lease renewal process. Until that is in place, we are going to continue to lose mom and pops. We're losing over 1,000 every single month across New York City. That equates to 8,000 and 9,000 lost jobs across all 5 boroughs. And what this bill would do would just give them rights to be able to negotiate a fair lease in the commercial lease renewal process.
So, Linda, why the legislative route? Is that the most effective sort of path of least resistance, although it's been 30 years of making this happen?
Yeah, that's right. The reason that Town Squared got so interested in the SBJSA is that we were hearing over and over again from the thousands of businesses that use Town Squared in New York that was their biggest challenge, that was their biggest problem. And so after we heard this from our members directly, we said, well, how can we get involved? So one of the ways is that Kirsten actually has an account, and it's been great to see her interacting with the businesses who, you know, normally it's really difficult for a small business owner to feel like they can get involved politically in any way, or like their voice even can be heard because they're a small fish, you know, in a big pond, and they have so much other stuff going on. So Town Squared, the reason that, you know, we have been partnering with Kirsten and with Take Back is because it's clear that it's really an important issue for small businesses, and it gives them a way to work together and have a louder voice because they're aligned. So that's really what Town Squared was built for, was to give businesses a way to support each other. And so, you know, it just worked out perfectly to have Kirsten use the site.
Okay, now I have to ask, what do we mean when we're talking about small businesses? Because in some terms from the federal level, that can mean businesses with 500 employees or less. On a state level, that can mean 100 employees or less, or 99 maybe.
It's a patchwork of different
patchwork. So how does that work in New York City, and how does it address that?
For the bill, for the Small Business Jobs Survival Act, it covers all commercial tenants. So that could be your bagel shop down the store, your dry cleaner. It could also be that 300-person attorney law firm on the 32nd floor of the Chrysler Building. It covers all commercial tenants. We wanted the bill to be inclusive of all commercial tenants and artists. We keep on talking about small businesses, but it's also important to notice this is affecting the arts community as well. And again, the goal is to be able to negotiate a fair lease, whether it be an art studio or an actual retail shop.
So where's the public outcry then? This thing has been sort of languishing for 30 years, and people, like in the case of the deli over here on Atlantic, where they're talking about the artisanal bacon and all that stuff, people signed a petition, but I don't see a lot of folks really rallying to make this happen.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do is exposure. A lot of folks don't know that this bill exists. As we're talking to residents and business owners across the city, everyone agrees that this is a solution, only because from a small business standpoint, their crippling fear is, I don't know what's going to happen to me when my lease renewal comes up. Yeah. From a resident standpoint, everyone can relate. They've seen the destruction happen firsthand in their own communities, and they know what's going on, and they want to stop. They want their mom and pops in their neighborhood. But there, like you said, there's been some challenges over the past 30 years, and primarily that challenge is the real estate lobby. They put very simply, and even Steve Spinola said it in The Villager a couple months ago, as Revenue sees it, the Small Business Job Survival Act will put too much power in the tenants' hands. It essentially will regulate the landlords, and the real estate lobby does not want that. Their whole purpose and concern is securing windfall profits for themselves, and that's all it's taking into consideration when the new lease terms are established. It never takes into consideration the commercial tenant. How about them? How come they can't make a fair profit, not only for themselves, but they had to be able to pay their employees a fair wage so they can support their families. And that's what we're going up against. It's a David versus Goliath type situation. The real estate lobby, which, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's the 1% versus the 99%.
You know, when I think about real estate, when you moving into a place, that lease is so big. There's so many. It's a contract, of course, but there's so many ins and outs to that contract. So how do people sort of get the information that they need to renegotiate leases when, their focus is this small business? They have a niche skill, but, like you said, it's the real estate lobby.
But the hard part is you really can't negotiate a fair lease when the landlord is constantly hanging over your head. I can evict you at any time I want. And until you take that piece out of the equation, you're not going to end economic inequality, and you're not going to level the playing field. And that's basically what the bill would accomplish.
So, Linda, from your membership, we're talking about landlords. How many of these, do you have numbers on just the metrics of this? How many are these sort of neighborhood landlords where Tony across the street owns the building there versus these sort of idea of the corporate overlord where we're going to raise the rent to $12,000?
Yeah, I think the tough part, I don't have any specific metrics to give you, but it is something that I hear over and over again, that even the businesses that have these, these small, hardworking families that own the buildings that they're renting, more and more, like Carroll Gardens is a really good example of this. You're seeing those landlords get a lot of pressure from the larger commercial landlords who are trying to gobble up the property. And I read an interesting article that it's like tearing families apart, causing trouble with, some people want to sell, some don't. And, ultimately, if the price is high enough, it's really hard for a small mom and pop landlord to say no. And I think that, what I'm hearing from the businesses that use Town Squared is those are fewer and further between. And it's more the larger companies that they're having to deal with.
So on the same steam, are we sort of tilting at windmills here? Is this the natural progression that, okay, pretty soon that butcher shop is going to go away and now there's a vegan juice bar thing because the folks in the neighborhood sort of want that? How much of this is going to be attrition or just, you had a good run, now it's time to sort of move on?
But in that example, we're really not seeing that so much. It's not the butcher being replaced by the vegan coffee shop or whatever. What we're seeing is that butcher being replaced by a chain bank when there's already a dozen in that little area. And when we talk about small businesses, I just wanted to point out, it's important to point out the types of jobs that they provide. These are jobs that employ predominantly immigrants, women, single moms, people who can't can't afford to lose their job in this very expensive city. Yeah. And when every time a woman's beauty salon or a lunch counter gets pushed out for a bank, like 100%, those people who lost their jobs aren't getting new jobs at that new bank. Yeah. So now we're talking about permanently altering the composition of the neighborhood, and when there aren't jobs that employ the long-term residents that have been living there, then it just expedites them getting pushed out, and we're seeing this happen all over the city.
Okay. Now, I have to ask, why doesn't the SBJSA make a delineation between a small business that has 10 employees and, you know, a business that has 500 employees, as, say, maybe a bank or a large franchise?
Because we want to include everybody. We don't want to discriminate, because then it would be unconstitutional, right? We just want to be able to include everybody, because the reality is, even if you work at a big bank, you know, that bank teller is trying to support his or her family too. They should be able to make a fair wage too, and that job should be preserved too. So we don't want to say, you know, and this is a popular misconception about the bill. The SBJSA, it's not anti-chains. It's not anti-capitalism. That's not what it's about. It's about rights. It's about ending economic inequality, and it's about preserving and creating jobs. That's what the bill is about.
So looking at the landscape here in Brooklyn in particular, I hear you and the valid point about, okay, this place is gone and then there's a bank moving in there. There's some neighborhoods, like sections of where I live in Bed-Stuy, where I have to get on my bike for a mile before I get to a bank, where there's only these little stores that may be barely hanging on, or beauty salons. So looking at that broader landscape, getting out of Carroll Gardens, do you have support in neighborhoods like that where they say, we'd love a bank, we don't need another check cashing place or place to get gym shoes? Like, what's that landscape like holistically?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, like I myself, I mean, I shop at CVS, you know, I'm not going to lie, you know, it's not like I'm against all chains, but I live in the East Village, and there's a bank on every other corner. So it's already been gentrified, my neighborhood. I mean, predominantly all Manhattan has been, except for Upper Manhattan, which is why all the council members in Manhattan, except for one, have sponsored this bill, because they've seen firsthand the destruction in their neighborhoods. But it's coming. You know, it's already happened in Williamsburg, and it's pushing out in the outer areas of Williamsburg, it's pushing into Queens, and now it's coming to the Bronx. So where it might be a little too late for Manhattan, it's not too late for the other boroughs, and that's what this is about.
So Linda, how isn't this asking business owners, whether they're the landlord across the street or a corporation, to subsidize your dream as a small business person or as an artist at the expense of making money and sustaining their folks?
I think what I'm hearing from the businesses that I've spoken to about this, and what they are, the stories that they're sharing on Town Squared, are not, it's not that the small business owner wants to make, you know, a 500% profit. What they're saying is that when their lease comes up, their rent is being increased 200, 300%. I think what they're asking for really is not that they want favorable treatment or that they want to be subsidized. They want a fair environment, and they don't feel that it's fair to them. And I know, you know, firsthand of several businesses who've shared stories about being forced out of Harlem, being forced out of this space where they invested their life and they've invested in their communities. You know, the reason that Town Squared really was started was to give the small businesses that make our communities special and that actually make our communities thrive. Like, if you spend $10 in a CVS, none of that really is going to stay within the community and circulate within the community. Maybe some of it because, you know, there might be some local jobs there. But when you spend money at a small business, like a women's beauty salon or, you know, the mom and pop deli down the street,
circulates like 8 times.
Exactly. So it leads to strong communities, and it leads to a better environment where a business of any size is going to be able to thrive. And it serves the residents, you know, that goes towards the taxes that make the community able to bolster itself and become more desirable. And I think, you know, to your point about Bed-Stuy and the services that you need there, how are you going to get any of the services that you need to move in when there's not a level playing field for everybody to succeed? And, you know, I think the biggest problem about wanting to make this, or the SBJSA, apply to every business is that every business in the community impacts the other businesses around them. And if there's a Chase that is going to pay, and they can take a loss on having a space where they're paying $25,000 a month for like this much, that's going to impact and bump up the rents for every other building on that block. So small businesses really live and die on their communities. And I think that's why it's really important for them to be connected, to know what's going on, and to have a voice.
Well, speaking of what's going on, where does the bill stand at currently?
So right now, we have 23 co-sponsors of the bill. The number we want to reach is 26. That will bring it to a vote. So that is what we're trying to achieve, obviously. You know, we're trying to not change the conversation, but focus the conversation a little bit different, because I think how it really initially started was kind of like a nostalgia thing. Oh my gosh, I just lost my my shoe cobbler, you know, down there. And that's sad, don't get me wrong. But we're trying to change the discussion. This is about jobs. This is about preserving jobs. This is about creating new jobs. The New York City small business owners, they are the economic backbone of our economy.
Well, we're going to have to leave it on that truth.
Okay.
We're so out of time. But they are the backbone. We always like to shop local around here, and we'll definitely be watching.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.